Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dear viewers, welcome to this episode of The Evolution of Fiqh. This is episode number 14, and we will be concluding the whole series in this episode, inshallah. Before I end, I will give a summary of what we talked about, so I will not start as I used to do with an overview of the previous episodes. I will start with Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah, praise be to Allah, and peace and blessings be on the Messenger of Allah, the most beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Last episode we were talking about certain pointers that are helpful in our practice of the religion, particularly in the area of fiqh that is called the acts of worship. And we said the first advice was about hastening to Allah and not wasting time and being aware of the tricks of the shaitan, the steps of the shaitan. One of them is I will, I shall, tomorrow, after tomorrow. Don't waste time and hasten to your Lord. As Musa alayhi salam, may Allah have peace on him and blessings, said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَعَجِلْتُ إِلَيْكَ رَبِّي لِتَرْضَى, I have come to you quickly, or I have hastened to you, my Lord, so that you may be pleased. The second point here is to take what Allah has prescribed for you with strength. Take what Allah has prescribed for you with strength. خُذُوا مَا أَتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ. This is what Allah said to us. Take what we have given you with strength and hold on to it firmly. And do not be tricked by misconceptions of laxity that are taking the shape of moderation, or being dressed in the garment of moderation. Moderation is Islam. Islam is moderation, and the revelation, the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is moderation. So if you hold firmly to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you're being moderate. The third point is to be consistent. The Prophet ﷺ used to say, and this hadith was reported by Bukhari and Muslim, and it was reported by Ahmad, different wordings of the hadith. أحب الأعمال إلى الله أدوامها وإن قل. Aisha reported this from the Prophet ﷺ, that he said, أحب الأعمال إلى الله, the most beloved deeds in the sight of Allah, أدوامها, the most consistent, even if they were few, or even if they were little. So it does not matter how big it is, it matters how consistent it is. So for instance, if you want to pray the night prayers, and all of us should try our best to do some of this great worship, the night prayers, the sign of sincerity, the time that you will spend with Allah and with Allah alone, communicating with Allah in the silence and the quietness and the calm of the night. Don't miss this great worship. So if you want to start, how should you start? Should you start with 8 rakahs in the first night? No, you should probably start with 2. And once you're very comfortable with 2, you move on to 4. And once you're very comfortable with 4, you continue to move up. But do 2 rakahs and be consistent with them. That is better than praying 8 rakahs in the first night, 6 in the second night, and then none on night 3 or 4. Consistency is important, and consistency is what works. Consistency is what works in the worship of Allah. It is what will get you closer to Allah. Consistency is what works in the acquiring of knowledge. The consistent seeker of knowledge is the one who gets to his objective. It is not the one who goes through episodes, or who goes through spikes, ups and downs. Sometimes he can spend like 10 hours studying in one day, and maybe weeks would go by and he would not open a book. That does not take you anywhere. What is beneficial and helpful is what is consistent. The fourth advice that I have is to prioritize. Prioritizing is extremely important. Abdullah ibn Abbas said, The Prophet ﷺ in a hadith said, if I walk with a brother of mine to the end of the village or to the other side of the village to run an errand for him or to do something for him, is more likable to me than making i'tikaf for a month in my own masjid, in my masjid. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that there are priorities. There are priorities. If you run an errand for your brother, or if you help your brother on one of his needs, that could be even better than making i'tikaf for a month. That is why some of the scholars said that the deeds that will benefit the group, the nation, the ummah, the community, the society, they have collective benefit, are better than the deeds that will only benefit you. So jihad, the da'wah, spreading of knowledge, learning and spreading of knowledge, all of these deeds do have precedence over the other deeds because they are of benefit for the entire ummah, not only for the individual. Yet, to be honest with you, the deeds that are most liked by Allah or most loved by Allah depend upon many factors, So, ta'aleem, learning and the spreading of knowledge, it's a deed with collective benefit for the entire community. Yet, during the time of the congregational prayer, you should not sit at home and study. Even if you're studying Quran, this is the time for the congregational prayer. If someone died and they need to be washed, you should not say, I am busy. If they need to be washed and no one will help wash them, then that's your duty now. You go and wash them. You visit the sick when they are sick. You do not wait a few weeks until they are better because you are busy. So this is contingent upon the time, the location, the needs of the ummah at this time, the needs of the society around you, your own talents. If someone is talented in academically talented, then that's the person who should be seeking knowledge and educating others. If someone is talented in computer programming, then this is how you can serve Islam, with this talent of yours. If you are talented in communicating with the people, then you should be a great da'iyah, and you should use this talent with communications in da'wah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the best deed in the sight of Allah is dependent on the time. When it is time for the congregational prayer, then it's time for the congregational prayer. When the enemies attack the Muslim lands, then it's time for jihad. When it is time for washing the dead or visiting the sick, then that's the time for this. It will go away. And if you don't use this time for this particular purpose, you will not be able to catch on to it. And it is dependent on the location. It depends on the needs of the society. If you have too many doctors in your place, then probably you can serve Islam better by being an engineer if there is lack of engineers, and so on and so forth. So depending on the time, depending on the place, depending on the talent, you should seek what is more liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not what is more liked by you. Because some people like certain acts of worship and they're comfortable with them. But if you're completely impartial and completely pure and devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be wanting to perform the acts of worship or to do the things that are most liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not that are most liked by you. Now I have a few things to say about transactions. We said that the fiqh is acts of worship, salah, siyam, hajj, fasting, praying, hajj, etc., and transactions, customs, etiquettes. These govern your relationship with the creation. In the area of transactions, there are a few pointers, and we don't have a lot of time to go through them in detail, but the few things that I wanted to say, or the few pieces of advice that I have, would be: number one, in transacting or interacting with any person, your neighbor, your wife, your mother, your son, your coworker, your classmate, make sure that you know your rights and duties, and you fulfill your duties before you ask for your rights. You fulfill your duties and obligations before you ask for your rights. And make sure that you do not seek complete fulfillment from the other party of their duties to you, or your rights on them. So Abdullah ibn Abbas taught us this. And certainly Abdullah ibn Abbas was taught this by the Prophet ﷺ. He said that I do not like to ask my wife or to require of my wife my full rights, my entire rights. وَمَا أُحِبُّ أَنْ أَسْتَنْظِفَ حَقِّي مِنْهَا. I do not attempt to ask of my wife to give me my full rights, 100% of my rights. Why is this so? Because there is a very fine line between that which is which is not. There is a very fine line between your rights and her rights. And because we as human beings are prone to be egotistic, then we are very prone to crossing this line if we come close to it. And also because of our lack of knowledge, because it's a very fine line. We may cross it if we come very close to it. So be careful. Stay away from the line. Give yourself a margin of safety. Drop 20% of your rights on people, or 15% of your rights on people, so that you're not demanding more than your rights. Because if you want to take the 100%, you may be asking for 105 because of our egotistic tendencies and because of our lack of knowledge. This is a very important principle in the area of transactions. Another important principle is that injustice, unfairness is a backbreaker for the worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the practitioner of this deen of Islam. No matter how much you pray and no matter how much you fast, if you're wrongdoing others, you will lose it all. The Prophet ﷺ said to his companions, asking them, do you know who's the person who's really broke? They said, the one who doesn't have money is the one who's really broke. أَتَدْرُونَ مَنِ الْمُفْلِسِ. He said to them, no, the one who's really broke is the one who performs deeds or does deeds of righteousness and goodness as big as the mountains, as enormous and big as the mountains, but then he will come on the Day of Judgment after he had insulted and violated the property of others and the life and the bodies of some, and people will be taken from his hasanat and throwing of their sayyat onto his scale of bad deeds until he gets completely broke. So be careful, be aware of this, and stay away from injustice. When we come back from the break, we will have more talk inshallah on this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
All the prophets are brothers, and they represent the same message. What was the call of the prophet? What was his invitation? He was inviting to what? So the prophet said, "Oh Allah, grant your mercy on the one who is tolerant if he sails, on one who is tolerant if he buys, and one who is tolerant when he seeks his rights."
In this program, Sheikh Abdul Rahman Damashkiya presents Reminders, a bouquet of various reminders and admonitions that we need to strengthen our faith, taste its sweetness, perfect our acts of worship, and refine our morals.
Try to discipline them in the best way. Those daughters will be his shield. That means those will be the reason, the cause of his protection from hellfire. Because of what? Taking care of them. What you have in this life, no matter what you have, is less, and it is temporary.
Huda TV wishes you and your family a spiritual and rewarding Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back. We were talking about certain pointers in the area of transactions, certain pieces of advice that will help us have a better understanding of this area and better practice of it, inshallah. We were talking in general about the issue of duties and rights and fulfilling your duties before you ask for your rights, and make sure that you do not ask for 100% of your rights, because if you do so, you're prone to be asking for more than 100%. And we said injustice can make you broke on the Day of Judgment, can make you lose all of your good deeds on the Day of Judgment, so be aware of it and stay away from injustice as much as you can. With regards to the area of the family laws, you have to remember that family life cannot be based only on rights and duties, even though we have to know our rights and duties because we need to fulfill our duties. But family life is based on tranquility, love, and compassion. Allah says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. One of His signs that He created for you from yourselves mates to indwell with in tranquility. لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. And He put between you compassion, mawadda, compassion, warahma, and mercy. Tranquility, compassion, and mercy. Homes cannot be built on any other foundations. They have to be built on the foundations of tranquility, compassion, and mercy. With regards to the financial transactions, there are certain things that we have to stay away from in any financial transactions. Ghubn, which is injustice or wrongdoing. Gharar, which is ambiguity, unclarity, lack of transparency. Riba, which is usury. And ghish can be also included under gharar, or deception, lying. That's also included under gharar. If you stay away from these, from injustice, from ambiguity, from usury, from deception, inshallah your transactions will be correct. That does not mean that you will be judging every contract yourself, whether it's permissible or not. You certainly need to refer to the scholars, but these are the main things that would cause a financial transaction to not be halal. In the area of judgment and seeking judgment, you will have to be aware that when you go to a judge, when you dispute with someone and go to the judge, it does not matter how eloquent you are, because if you're eloquent, if you are well-versed and eloquent, and then by this eloquence you take the rights of the other party, then the Prophet ﷺ is telling you that you are taking a piece of fire. He said that you come to me and dispute and seek my judgment, and I am a human being. One of you may be more eloquent than the other, so he may present his case in a way that is better. So I may give him the right of his brother. If I do, I am giving him a piece of the hellfire. So let him take it if he wants, or leave it. So it doesn't matter how eloquent you are, or how clever you are, or how good you will present your case. What matters is the truth. Is this your right or not? If it is not your right and the judge gives it to you, that does not mean that it is yours. It is still not yours. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you pay for this on the day of judgment. On that day, there is no currency but hasanat and sayyat, good deeds and bad deeds, sins and merits. So, before that day, make sure that you covered yourself. Make sure that you are not, you will not be asked by anyone. Your hasanat will not be taken by anyone. Also, it is important to know that even if you had to seek judgment from a secular court, because there is no religious court, there is no Islamic court, and you seek judgment from a secular court, what they give you does not mean that it is yours. If they give you more than what you're entitled to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Islam, then the right thing to do, and the only right thing to do, is to say, well, I am only entitled to 3,000. Sometimes you have to go to secular courts to retrieve your rights from people who are wrongdoers, and you try to tell them, come to the imam, or let's solve it between us, and let's go to the imam of the masjid, and so on. They refuse. You take them to the secular court to retrieve your rights. But if the judge gives you more than what's yours, more than what you're entitled to, it is not yours. You say, I am entitled to 3. This is what the scholar or the judge, the Muslim judge said, and I was given 5. I will return 2. And that's the only way to purge your deen from sins. Now, this is the end of this series. We have covered several topics. This was an introduction to fiqh to make our own understanding of fiqh and the deen in general evolve. So we called it evolution of fiqh. We meant evolution of my and your fiqh, to be able to have a better understanding, a better grasp on the issue of fiqh, and a better understanding of the topics of fiqh. In this introduction, we talked about the meanings of fiqh. We talked about the importance of learning fiqh, the scope of fiqh. We talked about issues like moderation and excessiveness. We said that excessiveness is not the only deviation from moderation. Laxity is another deviation from moderation, but in a different direction. We talked about the source of fiqh. We talked about some principles from the fundamentals of jurisprudence and the legal principles that will help us in our understanding of fiqh. We also talked about the disagreements between the scholars and our position from these agreements and what it should be. We talked about the different categories, or the main categories of fiqh, and we covered some of the main issues. We had a few pieces of advice regarding the acts of worship and our practice of them, and regarding transactions and customs and our practice of this part of fiqh. Now we will go through some of the fiqh books that you may find helpful or beneficial. Certainly there are many fiqh books that are not translated, many fiqh books that you'll find helpful and beneficial in Arabic that have not been translated. The fiqh books in general belong to one of two categories. Some fiqh books are after the hadith. The scholars collect the hadith that pertain to the area of fiqh or the area of rulings. They collect them, they put them in chapters, and then scholars, the same scholar or some other scholar, explains those ahadith and shows the fiqh rulings that are deduced from these ahadith, and they can also mention other ahadith that pertain to the same issue or the same matter. There are books like Nail al-Awtar or Subul al-Salam that follow this model. There are other books that are based in their arrangement on the topics of fiqh and these are the classical fiqh books. This is the model that's followed by most of these scholars of the madhahib, and they just go through the chapters. They usually start with purity, or almost all of them start with purity, and then prayers, and then zakah and siyam and hajj. There are certainly some differences in the order, but almost all of them start with purity and salah. And after the acts of worship are done, they go to the area of transactions, selling and buying and family laws, judgment, and so on, and so forth. The books that are available in the English language, I know that Minhaj al-Muslim is available in the English language, and this is a book written by Abu Bakr al-Jazairi, a scholar from Algeria who lives in Medina, and he was a teacher in Medina. Minhaj al-Muslim is not only a book on fiqh, it's also a book on manners and etiquettes, and part of it also is on aqeedah. In fact, it starts with aqeedah and then addresses the manners and etiquettes of the Muslim, and the last part of it, which is the biggest part of it, is on fiqh, and that's one of the good books. Fiqh Made Easy may be a primer, maybe something that you can start with, written by Salih As-Sadlan, a scholar called Salih As-Sadlan. Fiqh As-Sunnah, I think it's the most comprehensive in the English language. I hope that that the translation gets completed. I hope it was completed, or if it wasn't completed, then it becomes completed in the near future. But certainly the part of the acts of worship has been completely translated of Fiqh Sunnah, which is written in Arabic by Sayyid Sabiq, a scholar, a contemporary scholar. All of these are contemporary scholars. Abu Bakr al-Jazairi, Sayyid Sabiq, and Salih As-Sadlan, they are all contemporary scholars. Fiqh Sunnah has been translated by Jamal Zarabozo, which will lead us to talking about this particular issue of the evolution of fiqh, or how to understand fiqh and how to understand our deen in general. Because Jamal Zarabozo, the one who translated Fiqh Sunnah by Sayyid Sabiq, is the one who wrote a nice book on this particular issue and similar issues called How to Understand Our Religion. And I do recommend this book for you, How to Understand Our Religion, by Jamaluddin Zarabozo. The last book that may be of benefit is a book by Bilal Phillips called The Evolution of Fiqh. Maybe the title of this was taken from the book, The Evolution of Fiqh by Bilal Phillips, and this will give you insight into the development of fiqh and the different schools of fiqh. Before I end, I have to tell you that fiqh is not like math. This is about our religion. This ilm, as Muhammad ibn Sirin said, this ilm is our religion. It is not like math, so we should not approach it like we approach math. Our approach to it should be with our minds and hearts as well. There are two different types of knowledge. One in the mind, or one on the tongue, as Al-Hasan al-Basri said, and one in the heart. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the knowledge that settles in the heart and that is of benefit, that would change our life. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us light in our hearts with which we can see a clear distinction between the truth and falsehood. And I wish that you enjoy Allah's favors and blessings, and that Allah increases all of us in knowledge and gives us guidance and makes us of the prosperous in this life and the hereafter. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.